In 1348, a wealthy merchant in London developed a festering wound on his buttocks that refused to heal. Within 3 weeks, the infection had spread through his bloodstream, causing his organs to shut down one by one. His crime? He had used the same piece of cloth to clean himself after defecation for over 2 months. This wasn't unusual behavior from medieval Europe. It was a standard practice that killed thousands and spread diseases that decimated entire populations. Medieval hygiene practices surrounding human waste disposal and personal cleaning created a perfect breeding ground for parasites, infections, and epidemic diseases. Without understanding of bacteria or proper sanitation, people developed cleaning methods but actively dangerous to their health and the health of their communities. The medieval approach to post-defecation cleaning involved materials and techniques that modern people would find horrifying. These practices weren't born from ignorance alone. They were shaped by economic necessity, religious beliefs, and the complete absence of scientific understanding about disease transmission. What you're about to discover will reveal how something as basic as cleaning yourself after using the bathroom became a deadly gamble that few people in medieval Europe could afford to win. In medieval Europe, most households shared a single piece of cloth for post-defecation cleaning. This wasn't a small personal rag. It was typically a large piece of linen or hemp fabric that every family member used, sometimes for months at a time. The cloth was never washed between uses, only occasionally rinsed in whatever water source was available. The shared cleaning cloth was passed from person to person, accumulating layers of fecal matter, blood from hemorrhoids, and discharge from various infections. Families would hang these cloths on hooks near their private areas or outdoor latrines, where they collected dust, insects, and additional contamination from the environment. The economic reasoning was simple. Fabric was expensive, and most families couldn't afford multiple pieces of cloth dedicated solely to personal hygiene. A single cleaning cloth represented a significant investment that had to last as long as possible. Parents taught their children to use the cloth sparingly, pressing it gently rather than wiping thoroughly to preserve the fabric. The health consequences were catastrophic. Intestinal parasites spread rapidly through families using shared cleaning cloths. Pinworms, roundworms, and other parasites found perfect conditions for transmission in the contaminated fabric. Bacterial infections like dysentery could wipe out entire households within days once introduced to the communal cleaning system. When fabric wasn't available, medieval people turned to natural materials for post-defecation cleaning. Smooth stones were the most common alternative, carefully selected for their size and texture. These stones were often kept in small collections near latrines, used repeatedly by multiple people without any cleaning between uses. The stone selection process was crucial. Too rough, and the stone would cause abrasions and bleeding. Too smooth, and it wouldn't effectively remove waste material. Medieval people developed expertise in choosing the right stones, passing this knowledge down through generations like any other survival skill. Sticks were another popular option, particularly thin branches from specific trees known for their flexibility and smoothness. Hazel and birch twigs were preferred because they could be stripped of bark and used like primitive toilet paper. The sticks were often chewed on one end to create a brush-like texture for more effective cleaning. The reuse of these natural materials created serious health hazards. Stones used for cleaning were contaminated with intestinal bacteria and parasites, which could survive on the surface for extended periods. When the same stones were used by multiple people, they became vectors for disease transmission. Infections like cholera and typhoid spread rapidly through communities that shared cleaning stones. The wooden sticks presented their own dangers. Splinters could embed in sensitive tissue, creating wounds that became infected. The bark and rough surfaces of untreated wood harbored bacteria and fungi that caused severe irritation and infection. Many people developed chronic anal fissures and infections from repeated use of contaminated wooden cleaning implements. Medieval nobility and wealthy merchants had access to more sophisticated cleaning materials, but their solutions were often more dangerous than the crude methods used by peasants. Silk cloths were the ultimate luxury, soft, reusable, and supposedly more hygienic than coarse linen. These silk cleaning cloths were often embroidered with family crests and treated as valuable possessions. The wealthy maintained collections of cleaning cloths, rotating between different pieces to allow for occasional washing. However, medieval washing techniques were inadequate for removing bacterial contamination. The cloths were typically rinsed in cold water without soap, then dried in the sun. This process removed visible waste material, but left behind dangerous pathogens that continued to spread infection. Perfume cleaning cloths were another aristocratic innovation. Wealthy households would soak their cleaning materials in rose water, lavender oil, or other fragrant substances. The goal was to mask odors and create a more pleasant cleaning experience. Instead, these additions created chemical irritation and provided additional nutrients for bacterial growth. Some noble families employed servants specifically to maintain their cleaning materials. These servants were responsible for washing, drying, and perfuming the cloths, then presenting them to their masters in ornate containers. The servants themselves often developed serious infections from handling contaminated materials without protection. The most extreme examples of wealthy excess involved imported materials from distant lands. Venetian merchants used silk import from China, while English nobles preferred linen from Flanders. These exotic materials were no cleaner than local alternatives, but they carried additional risks, foreign parasites and diseases that European immune systems couldn't handle. But that was just the beginning of medieval cleaning innovation. Medieval monasteries developed their own approaches to post-defecation cleaning, influenced by religious beliefs about cleanliness and purity. Monks and nuns were required to maintain higher standards of hygiene than laypeople, but their methods were often more harmful than helpful. The rule of Saint Benedict specified that monks should use only natural materials for personal cleaning, avoiding anything that might be considered luxurious or indulgent. This religious restriction limited monasteries to stones, sticks, and coarse cloth made from hemp or nettle fibers. Monastic communities shared cleaning materials just like secular families, but on a much larger scale. A single monastery might house hundreds of monks, all using the same collection of cleaning stones and cloths. The potential for disease transmission was enormous, and monastic records document frequent outbreaks of dysentery and other intestinal diseases. Some monastic orders developed elaborate purification rituals around the use of cleaning materials. The stones and cloths had to be blessed by a priest before use, and specific prayers were recited during the cleaning process. These rituals consumed significant time and resources while providing no actual health benefits. The most extreme monastic practices involved deliberate discomfort as a form of spiritual discipline. Some orders required their members to use rough stones or splintered wood for cleaning, viewing the resulting pain and irritation as a form of penance. These practices caused severe injuries and infections that were interpreted as signs of divine favor rather than medical problems. Medieval cities created unique challenges for post-defecation cleaning. Dense populations, limited space, and inadequate waste disposal systems turned urban areas into breeding grounds for disease. City dwellers developed cleaning practices that were adapted to their environment but often made contamination problems worse. Public latrines in medieval cities served dozens or even hundreds of people daily. These facilities typically provided communal cleaning materials, shared cloths, stone collections, or bundles of sticks that anyone could use. The level of contamination was staggering, with cleaning materials accumulating waste from people suffering from various diseases and infections. City authorities occasionally attempted to regulate communal cleaning materials, but enforcement was virtually impossible. Some cities required public latrine operators to provide fresh cleaning materials daily, but this was rarely done due to the expense involved. Most operators simply collected used materials, gave them a cursory rinse, and put them back into service. The proximity of urban cleaning areas to food preparation and water sources created additional health hazards. Contaminated cleaning cloths were often washed in the same streams and wells that provided drinking water. The runoff from these washing activities spread intestinal parasites and bacterial infections throughout the urban water supply. Street vendors sold cleaning materials to city dwellers who couldn't afford their own supplies. These entrepreneurs collected used cloths and stones from various sources, gave them minimal cleaning, and resold them at markets throughout the city. The buyers had no way of knowing the history of these materials or the diseases they might carry. Medieval farmers and rural communities developed cleaning practices that incorporated materials from their agricultural environment. These practices seemed logical at the time but created serious health risks that affected both humans and livestock. Sheep's wool was a popular cleaning material in pastoral communities. Fresh wool was soft and absorbent, making it seem ideal for personal hygiene. However, wool from living sheep carried parasites, bacteria, and fungi that could cause severe infections. Sheep were often infected with intestinal worms that could be transmitted to humans through contaminated wool. Farmers also used dry corn husks, hay, and other plant materials for cleaning. These materials were readily available and seemed more hygienic than reused cloths or stones. However, dry plant matter harbored insects, mold spores, and bacterial contamination that caused allergic reactions and infections. The practice of using animal hair for cleaning was widespread in communities with access to horses, cattle, and other livestock. Horsehair was particularly prized for its strength and flexibility. People would collect hair from animal grooming and bundle it into cleaning implements. The hair carried animal diseases and parasites that could be transmitted to humans through contact with sensitive tissue. Some rural communities use fresh leaves for cleaning, selecting specific plants based on their size, texture, and availability. While this practice avoided the contamination problems of reused materials, it introduced new risks. Many plants commonly used for cleaning contain irritating chemicals or toxic compounds that caused burns, rashes, and poisoning. The agricultural connection between human and animal waste created additional contamination cycles. Cleaning materials used by humans were often discarded in areas where livestock grazed, spreading human parasites to animals. When the same animals provided materials for human cleaning, the parasites returned to the human population in a vicious cycle of reinfection. Medieval attitudes toward washing with water for post-defecation cleaning were complex and often contradictory. While water seemed like an obvious cleaning solution, medieval medical theory and religious doctrine created barriers to its widespread adoption. The dominant medical theory of the time held that water could open the pores and allow evil humors to enter the body. Physicians warned that washing sensitive areas with water could cause illness by disrupting the body's natural balance of hot and cold, wet and dry humors. This medical advice discouraged people from using water for intimate cleaning. Religious authorities also had concerns about water washing. Some Christian theologians argued that excessive attention to bodily cleanliness was a form of vanity that distracted from spiritual concerns. Monks and nuns were often forbidden from washing their private areas with water except in cases of illness. When water was used for cleaning, it was typically cold and drawn from contaminated sources. Medieval people had no understanding of water purification, so they used whatever water was available, often the same streams and wells that received human and animal waste. This contaminated water spread diseases rather than preventing them. The technique of water washing was also problematic. Without soap or other cleaning agents, water alone was ineffective at removing waste material and bacteria. People would simply splash contaminated water on themselves, spreading the contamination to new areas rather than removing it. Some communities developed elaborate water washing rituals that were supposed to provide spiritual as well as physical cleansing. These ceremonies often involved multiple people using the same water source, creating ideal conditions for disease transmission. The shared water became increasingly contaminated as more people used it for cleaning. But the medieval world had an even darker solution. One of the most disturbing medieval cleaning practices involved the use of human urine for post-defecation hygiene. This practice was based on the belief that urine had antiseptic properties and could prevent infection and disease. Medieval medical texts actually recommended urine washing for various ailments, including hemorrhoids and anal infections. The practice typically involved collecting urine in vessels that were kept near latrines for easy access. Family members would contribute to the communal urine supply, which was used by everyone for cleaning purposes. The urine was sometimes diluted with water or mixed with herbs to make it more pleasant to use. Fresh urine was preferred over aged urine for cleaning purposes, but storage and preservation created additional problems. Urine containers were rarely cleaned thoroughly, allowing bacteria to multiply and contaminate the entire supply. The ammonia in decomposing urine could cause severe chemical burns when applied to sensitive tissue. Some medieval physicians recommended using the urine of specific people for cleaning. Pregnant women, virgins, or children were thought to have particularly pure urine with enhanced healing properties. This practice created a black market in human urine, with people selling their bodily fluids for medical and hygiene purposes. The belief in urine's medicinal properties was so strong that some people drank their own urine while also using it for external cleaning. This practice was thought to purify the body from within while protecting against external contamination. The reality was that drinking contaminated urine spread internal infections and parasites throughout the body. Medieval military forces often used communal urine cleaning when water was scarce during campaigns. Soldiers would collect their urine in shared containers and use it for various hygiene purposes. This practice contributed to the spread of diseases that could disable entire armies and determine the outcomes of battles. Medieval women faced unique challenges in post-defecation cleaning due to anatomical differences and social restrictions. Their experiences were often more dangerous and complicated than those of men, leading to higher rates of infection and death from hygiene-related causes. Women's anatomy made them more susceptible to urinary tract infections when using contaminated cleaning materials. The shorter urethra and proximity to the anal area meant that bacteria from cleaning cloths and stones could easily spread to the urinary system. Medieval medical records show that women died from kidney infections at much higher rates than men. Menstrual blood on cleaning materials created additional contamination problems for women. The blood provided extra nutrients for bacterial growth, making shared cleaning cloths even more dangerous. Women who used contaminated materials during menstruation often developed severe reproductive tract infections that could lead to sterility or death. Pregnancy created special cleaning challenges for medieval women. The physical changes of pregnancy made it difficult to clean effectively, while the increased blood flow to the pelvic area made infections more likely and more dangerous. Pregnant women who developed infections from contaminated cleaning materials often miscarried or died in childbirth. Social restrictions limited women's access to better cleaning materials and methods. Women were often given the oldest, most worn cleaning cloths while men used the newer materials. In many households, women were responsible for maintaining the family's cleaning supplies, exposing them to higher levels of contamination through handling and washing. The practice of female seclusion during menstruation meant that women were often isolated with contaminated cleaning materials for extended periods. This isolation prevented them from seeking help when infections developed, leading to more severe complications and higher mortality rates. The medieval approach to post-defecation cleaning created a vast network of disease transmission that connected every level of society. Contaminated cleaning materials served as vectors for parasites, bacteria, and viruses that spread through families, communities, and entire regions. Intestinal worms were the most common problem caused by contaminated cleaning materials. Pinworms, roundworms, hookworms, and tapeworms all thrived in the conditions created by medieval hygiene practices. These parasites could cause severe malnutrition, anemia, and death, particularly in children and elderly people. Bacterial infections spread rapidly through shared cleaning materials. Dysentery, cholera, and typhoid fever were common killers that spread through contaminated cleaning cloths and stones. Once established in a community, these diseases could kill a significant percentage of the population within weeks. The social structure of medieval society accelerated disease transmission through cleaning practices. Servants who maintained cleaning materials for wealthy families carried infections between households. Traveling merchants and pilgrims spread contaminated materials and diseases across long distances. Trade networks inadvertently facilitated the spread of cleaning-related diseases. Cloth merchants who sold cleaning materials often stored different fabrics together, allowing contamination to spread between products. Buyers had no way of knowing whether materials they purchased carried diseases from previous owners. The most devastating example of cleaning-related disease transmission was the role of contaminated materials in spreading the Black Death. While the plague was primarily spread by fleas, contaminated cleaning cloths and personal items helped transmit the disease between family members and close contacts. The economic impact of medieval cleaning practices was staggering, affecting everything from individual families to entire kingdoms. The diseases spread through contaminated cleaning materials reduced agricultural productivity, disrupted trade, and consumed enormous resources in futile treatment attempts. Families often spent their entire savings on medical treatments for infections caused by contaminated cleaning materials. Medieval physicians charged high fees for treatments that were not only ineffective but often made the problems worse. Many families fell into poverty after a single serious infection that could have been prevented with proper hygiene. The lost productivity from cleaning-related illnesses affected entire communities. When significant portions of the population were sick or dying from preventable diseases, agricultural work suffered, crafts went unfinished, and trade relationships collapsed. Some towns and villages were completely abandoned after disease outbreaks decimated their populations. Military campaigns were often determined by the hygiene practices of opposing armies. Forces with better cleaning materials and practices had significant advantages over those using traditional medieval methods. Some battles were won not through superior tactics or weapons, but because one army was too sick to fight effectively. The textile industry was distorted by demand for cleaning materials. Significant resources were devoted to producing cloths that would be used for waste cleaning rather than more productive purposes. The quality of these materials was often poor because they were expected to be disposable, leading to even worse hygiene outcomes. Religious institutions spent enormous amounts of money on treatments and care for people suffering from cleaning-related diseases. Monasteries and convents maintained hospitals and medical facilities that were overwhelmed by preventable illnesses. These resources could have been used for education, agriculture, or other productive activities. The true tragedy was that simple solutions existed but were not adopted due to ignorance and superstition. Basic soap-making techniques were known but not widely used. Clean water sources were available but not protected from contamination. The knowledge needed to prevent these diseases existed but was not applied to personal hygiene practices. Medieval post-defecation cleaning practices represent one of history's most deadly examples of how ignorance can masquerade as necessity. Every single death from contaminated cleaning materials was preventable with knowledge that existed elsewhere in the world. But medieval Europe remained trapped in a cycle of ignorance that killed millions. The shared cleaning cloths, contaminated stones, and toxic urine washes weren't just primitive solutions to a basic human need. They were systematic methods of disease transmission that turned the most intimate aspect of human life into a potential death sentence. Families destroyed themselves with their own cleaning practices, passing infections from parent to child, husband to wife, master to servant. The economic cost was measured not just in coins spent on worthless treatments, but in entire civilizations that never reached their potential because so much human energy was devoted to suffering and dying from preventable diseases. The artistic achievements, technological innovations, and cultural developments that were lost to cleaning-related illness represent an incalculable tragedy. Medieval people weren't stupid or careless. They were trapped in a system of beliefs and practices that seemed logical within their limited understanding of the world. They followed the advice of physicians who were themselves ignorant of basic hygiene principles. They trusted religious authorities who viewed bodily cleanliness as spiritually dangerous. They used methods passed down through generations without questioning their effectiveness. The horror of medieval cleaning practices lies not in their primitive nature, but in their persistence despite overwhelming evidence of their dangers. Generation after generation watched their loved ones die from infections that started with contaminated cleaning materials, yet they continued to use the same methods that had killed their ancestors. The lesson isn't that medieval people were inferior to modern humans, but that knowledge without understanding is worthless, and tradition without evidence is deadly. Every time you reach for clean toilet paper, you are benefiting from centuries of accumulated knowledge paid for with the lives of countless people who died because they didn't know that something as simple as cleaning yourself could kill you. The medieval approach to post-defecation cleaning killed more people than most wars, destroyed more families than most famines, and caused more suffering than most plagues. It was a quiet apocalypse that played out in the most private moments of human life, invisible to history but devastating to those who lived through it.